What is up, YouTube? What is up, Canada? Matt McKeever here, and today I'm going to tell you exactly whether the real estate market's going to crash or boom forever again. No, I obviously don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you with certainty what's going to happen, but I figured let's chat about some of the maybe rumors that I've been hearing, some of the anecdotal stories I'm hearing as well from investors and realtors. Let's maybe take a look at some of the headlines, and then let's chat about what you should actually do depending upon your personal situation, because it actually really comes down to what your goals are and why you're thinking about buying real estate, in my opinion, in regards to whether you should be actively looking to buy right now or whether you should be sitting on the sidelines. Because again, there's a lot of drama, a lot of FOMO, a lot of fear I just see in general. And it's coming in all directions, really. So let's pull up the screen share here. And I figured let's just kind of look. If I just Google Canada housing market, so I'm not really saying crash or boom or bust or anything like that, but let's just kind of see what's going on. And, home ownership dreams dashed for many young Canadians. Again, I think this is kind of a reoccurring headline that, they probably just use the same headline, I guess, once a month. Maybe they just switch out, the order of the words, but essentially the gist of the content's the exact same. Canada's hot housing market burns first-time buyers. Tighter mortgage standards, blind bidding ban may be needed to slow housing market. Now, you guys know my opinion when it comes to regulations and rules. I don't think that that's going to actually solve the problem we're in. So I don't think that making restrictions on blind biddings are going to really make a difference. I think that what really needs to happen here is a complete different approach to policy. But again, we'll get into that in a little bit. And I do want to talk about for you guys in your personal situation, what I think you should be doing. Motley Fool had a article that was kind of speculating on 3 ways the housing market could correct. Bank of Canada governor says red hot housing market showing signs of speculative behavior. You don't say there, Sherlock. Will the Toronto real estate market crash soon? I think this is something people are asking themselves quite often now. I guess when I think about Canadian real estate market crash, I don't think anyone really does it better at predicting it other than our buddy Garth Turner. So the Greater Fool, that's what it is. So I've actually been following the Greater Fool for a long time. I'm not a regular reader of the blog, but again, I did always enjoy the dog photos and the other kind of random memes that he would post. But if you guys aren't familiar, for at least the last 10 years or so that I've been following him here, Garth has been predicting essentially a huge correction in Canadian real estate. And I'm not even saying that some of the logic he was using was wrong, but it's one of those things where I think a lot of people right now that are also using these headlines, they don't really care whether they're right or wrong. They're just trying to get the headline. And so what I really want to explore with you guys in particular is what are the actual implications for you? So I'm going to get rid of this screen share and let's chat one-on-one. First things first, I think right now, if you're keeping your ear to the ground, you're maybe hearing anecdotal stories from realtors that actually could have you confused whether you're coming or going. So I would say for the last maybe 2-3 weeks, or how long have we been in this new lockdown? I forget. But however long that's been going on, / just slightly before that period of time, a lot of the realtors I was talking to, some of the investors, some of the wholesalers that I chat with, they were starting to see the market not correct, but maybe soften. Deals that would maybe get 20 bids would now get 5 bids or 3 bids or just sell at asking. Now, again, these anecdotal stories obviously don't tell us a lot. But what I do see from these anecdotal stories is just a general kind of concern. And so I think right now there is more general concern about the real estate market and where it currently stands than probably there's been for a little bit now. But again, there's lots of asterisks to that, right? Like we had Toronto condos just going on a tear there. And I don't know, I'm not hearing the same sort of concern from the Toronto condo market as I'm hearing from maybe some other parts of the market. At the same time, I feel like literally just this last week, a lot of the realtors I've been talking to, so like just this weekend and counting today, a lot of the realtors I'm talking to, some of the investors and wholesalers are starting to sound very bullish again. So right now, this market just seems like it can't figure out whether it's coming or going. So it literally is just like one day it's a high, one day it's a low. I think that just more in general shows the general uncertainty that's going on in the market. And so there's a lot of general uncertainty. And I think regardless of which side you want to argue, whether it's real estate go up forever or whether it's real estate correct very soon, yeah, I understand how you came to that conclusion because there's actually a lot of data points that probably point to either one or maybe both. So if you're on the real estate goes up forever, all we need to do is look at the government printing presses, right? All you need to do is look at what real inflation is versus the inflation they tell you with CPI. All you need to do is just ask the people around you whether they're concerned about being able to own real estate in the future. In general, a lot of that information, anecdotal or statistical, if you dig into it, is probably going to make you bullish on real estate in general because, hey, printing press right now is going whir. And, everything on top of that really does indicate that we are seeing a lot of inflation. And again, we talked about inflation last week on a live. So if you guys want to see my opinions and some of my anecdotal stories and some of the rest of the audience's anecdotal stories, go and check out that video. But building upon this, it's important to understand those are signals that can make you think that real estate's always going to go up. On the flip side are the individuals looking at, the average Canadian's debt load. And so that still is among the highest you're going to find. Others will look at, what's going on with our GDP and the government debt and concerns about, can we really outgrow the problem we find ourselves in? People have concerns about servicing the debt. And could this all just put a damper on economic activity to the point where you see the real estate market correct? Others just think that, hey, it's simply not affordable. Your average family can't afford your average house. And that can't sustain that long, presumably. Yeah, again, I can understand how you could become bearish based upon some of those facts. And again, other sources and other narratives as well on why maybe this can't last forever. I think the bigger question you need to figure out is what's your exact situation and why are you thinking about buying real estate or why are you thinking of selling real estate? So I'm going to mainly focus on the buying side of things. But again, you can view your situation if you're a seller through a very similar set of lenses. So the first thing is, why are you thinking about buying real estate? Is it because of FOMO? And so I'm going to define FOMO here as fear of missing out. And that essentially I see as an emotional response to a lot of the headlines that I was just showing. So if you're scared that you're never going to be able to buy a house, I don't blame you when you see articles like, Canada's hot housing market burns first-time buyers or homeownership dreams dashed for many young Canadians. Yep, I can totally understand how you might come to the conclusion of having FOMO when it comes to real estate there. However, if the reason that you want to buy real estate is because of FOMO, that is an emotional reaction. And because it's an emotional reaction, I can almost guarantee you that buying real estate right now isn't the right choice for you. And the reason I say that is because no matter what, it's going to continue to be an emotional roller coaster for you. So what you actually need to do is decouple your emotions in real estate. And this is actually really important because I see so many investors right now falling victim to this mentality where they're scared that they're never going to become an investor if they don't jump in blindly right now. That's almost a recipe to get hurt. And if your first deal, we've got an entire ebook on this called The Great Filters ebook, where I talk about why isn't everyone a real estate millionaire. But in that ebook, I explore the fact that for a lot of people, if their first deal goes bad, if their first deal goes really bad, that usually is it. That kills any of their dreams, any of their hopes, any of their motivation, any of the momentum they had towards becoming a successful investor. It almost gets squashed with that first deal. So again, it's important that you're not just emotionally jumping in blindly into buying real estate because you fear that you'll never be able to own it. Because that means that every new time that there's a headline that comes out that says real estate's going to crash, you're going to have a similar emotional reaction where you're going to start to panic and wonder whether you bought at the top. So that right there just seems like a recipe for disaster. So if you're a FOMO buyer, I'd say, hey, take a beat, take a breath. Maybe wait until COVID's over, let the dust settle if that's your logic is just simply fear. Now, there's a different type of emotional buyer that I think can actually make sense to still want to buy right now. And the emotional buyer that can make sense right now is the one that's like, hey, I just want to own my dream house. I just want a bunch of space right now. I'm not sure whether lockdowns are going to continue or whether they're going to end soon. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I need more space. Now, if you're coming at it from that emotional perspective where you're like, there's no cost too dear for me to have more space or more room or a backyard or whatever it is that you dream of. Well, in that case, as long as you've literally figured out your financial situation and you can afford it, yeah, go be an emotional buyer, right? And this is one of the things that I often talk with people about when they talk to me about wanting to buy a short-term rental property. Or more often, they're like, I want to buy a cottage and maybe rent it out. I'm like, cool. But very first thing, we need to figure out which is the priority. Is it you owning the cottage and the dreams of just being a Canadian with a cottage, or is it rental property that has a bonus as a cottage? Because there's very different underlying motivations there. For a lot of individuals, if the primary goal is, say, rental property, well, you may not be able to justify waterfront because you can likely buy a water view for a fraction of the price and still be able to rent it out at a good premium. Whereas if it's primarily an emotional decision, well, it might be waterfront or bust for you. In which case, yeah, go make that emotional decision, but understand that you're making an emotional lifestyle decision, not an investment. If you're thinking of making an emotional investment, stop right now. Do not invest. That is a recipe for disaster. If you're thinking of making an emotional life decision, yeah, you do you. Again, ideally, you've got your finances figured out and you can actually afford it, but go ahead. The next thing I want to focus on is when we are trying to be an investor in this market, it has to be for fundamentals. And now, some of the fundamentals I hear being thrown around, you know what? I'm being conservative. I'm estimating only 10% appreciation for the next 5 years. In what world is that? In what world other than the world of hyperinflation is that being conservative with your estimates? And yet there's a whole group of investors right now, or speculators, maybe they'd be better called, that literally are using that as their investment thesis. They're thinking that they're being conservative because they're not estimating 20% year over year increases in prices. Again, maybe we're in a crazy hyperinflation cycle and it works out for those individuals, but I don't like the fundamentals behind it because, again, it's really dependent upon just one lever pushing you into something that's going to work. When I'm talking about fundamentals, ideally, I'm talking about cash flow. I'm talking about a property that can sustain itself for an extended period of time. And so, again, it's not just about being break even from a cash flow, but being able to handle even a slight bear market should a bear market occur in rental prices. Right now, it seems unthinkable because there's so much demand for units and we're seeing such an increase year over year for the average rental unit. But with kind of all new time highs with rental prices, I would encourage individuals, if you're using today's fair market values on your projections, maybe we scale that back by 20%, right? Because again, right now there's certain properties where we originally projected a $1,400 or $1,500 a month in maximum gross rent per unit, where we're able to get $1,800. Again, that's wonderful, and that adds to your net margin, or that allows you to recoup other costs or expenses that maybe catch you off guard. But I don't think that it's safe to consider that projected out throughout the entirety of your investment portfolio. Now, again, we've talked about it in the past. I am very bullish on rent prices because of things like, I think, government stimulus, I think potential future UBI, just the establishment of a floor when we're talking about rental price demand, right? Through essentially programs like CERB or CRB now, where $2,000 a month. In essence, if we look at the average Canadian that spends 30-40% of their income on shelter, well, presumably they can afford to spend that $600 to $800 a month of their CERB or CRB money on similar shelter. So again, I definitely see reasons to be bullish when we're talking about this, but I think you need to focus on the fundamentals of what you're investing in because there's just so many people that their base assumption of fundamentals is broken. You need to start over at first principles thinking, in my opinion, when looking at it. And now again, if you came to the conclusion that hyperinflation's here and nothing can stop it, so be it. You make your investment decisions based upon your own research and due diligence. But way too many people, I think, are just towing the line and they're not critically thinking and trying to view all the different puzzle pieces, I guess, on the table. And so that's really what I want to encourage you guys to do. First, figure out what it is you're trying to do with real estate investing before we start panic buying or selling. Again, there's maybe a reason to want to be a buyer in this market, and there's maybe a reason to want to be a seller in this market. But what it actually comes down to is the individual context of your situation. What are you trying to accomplish? What's your end goal as an investor? That makes the rest of this very easy. I'll give you an example that I just had on a one-on-one coaching session earlier today with a team member. She's currently wondering, should I buy another rental property or should I buy a vacation rental property? And, what's my decision factor there? And, how do I decide? Because the one sounds so much funner than the other because, a waterfront property sounds way cooler than owning necessarily one more student rental to add to your portfolio. And as we were kind of breaking down and analyzing the situation, my number one goal at understanding why even consider buying a cottage as a rental property is, do you believe it cash flows more as a higher return than the student rental? If the answer is no, again, it may or may not depend upon your local market, but if the answer is no, then it's not primarily for an investment decision. So then the second big factor is, well, what's the trade-off I'm going to make by going after this type of rental property? And then what's my actual use case? So how often am I going to use this rental, this vacation or cottage rental for personal use? And honestly, if it's only going to be a week or two of the year, is it really about me having that cottage, or is it me having that cottage experience? And the reason I bring this up is a good friend of mine, his family is always they've always loved going away for the summer. And I know multiple times they've debated, should we buy a cottage or just rent a cottage? Well, for them, it's about the experience of going to the cottage and the memories they make. It's not about the actual location or the specific cottage itself. And they actually kind of like the idea of bouncing around. So it turns out for them, the idea of owning a cottage just to use it for 2 weeks of the year doesn't really make a lot of sense, even if it could break even as a rental property, because it would still have a high pain in the ass factor for them. So they're much better to go and just rent a cottage for 2 weeks of the year and be able to just leave all the baggage of ownership at the door and not really have any concerns about that. And as we were exploring this with my employee, she realized yeah, actually, you know what? Probably the max we're ever going to use the cottage for personal use for the next 5-10 years is probably 2 weeks. And so in that case, it probably makes more sense for us, if we think that student rentals are going to be a better investment, to get that student rental and then use some of the profits from it to help us, have that 2 weeks of the year vacation at a cottage. And hey, maybe for the next few years, we can go sample a bunch of different cottages and figure out what's the right cottage for us long-term. Because I think that's the other thing. Again, if this is an emotional decision primarily, and you've got dreams of we carved our names in the tree and it's there 20 years later. Yeah, okay, that's a certain type of approach and that's a certain emotion attached to it. If instead it's just the memories of being together, I'd argue that you might actually make more memories by having different locations. Remember that one year we had the shitty cottage? Remember the one year we had the amazing cottage? Yada, yada, yada. Probably doesn't blur together the same way that going to the same cottage every year does. But you may not have the same connection to that cottage either. And I think it personally probably comes down to how often you're going to use it as well. But these are important things to be aware of when you're deciding whether you want to get into investing. And then one last kind of point I wanted to make here was, if you're viewing buying real estate just as an inflation hedge, well, if you've decided 100% that inflation is going to go up no matter what, and you want to get into real estate, again, I can understand the desire to want to get into that asset class, but I question whether that's really the best asset for you to get into. Now, again, depending upon exactly what you're getting into, it may make total sense for you, or it may be a terrible idea. But the one thing that I see people making a mistake of when they're thinking about real estate and it as an inflation hedge, sometimes I hear people that have the opinion of, hey, I don't care if I make money, even if I lose a little bit of money, as long as I'm roughly break even, I'm good with it. I'm just going to go in and invest. No big deal. But they're thinking of it as the same way as buying a stock, as in you can literally own it and forget it almost. Well, that's not really the case with real estate. We're going to need a manager in place, and you're probably still going to have to manage the manager. Even if it's just that condo that you're man, I bought a brand new condo, I'm going to be hands-free. Maybe you get a dream tenant, maybe you don't, but there's still going to be some factor of management involved there. And so again, it may not actually be the right fit for you if you want a truly painless, touch-free investment experience. But the key here is context, and you guys do you. So first thing is, you need to know where you're at. What are you trying to accomplish? What are your goals as a real estate investor? Or ideally, what does being a real estate investor mean to you before you even decide on setting some arbitrary goals? If you guys are interested, we've got an entire free ebook on this. It's your Discover Your Why ebook. So in that ebook, I'm really just trying to help you guys figure out how to discover your why, figure out what it is you really want. Because once you figure out what it is you really want, then we can start building a plan together. And so in the second half of that ebook, it breaks down SMART goals and really just the step-by-step process in order for you to develop a SMART goal that presumably is in real estate that fits your needs of your overall why. As well, just before I forget, guys, we're actually going to be shooting new episodes of Deal Destruction this Sunday, I believe. So if you guys are interested, if you haven't had a chance to come on Deal Destruction, or maybe you have and you've got a new deal, we'd love for you guys to book an episode. It's this Sunday. You'll find a link in my Instagram. So on my link tree, you'll find a link there. And if you're watching the replay of this, we'll make sure we throw it in the comments on this video as well. But I'd love to have a full schedule of people booking Deal Destruction, because one of our struggles is actually just getting people to show up for Deal Destruction. So if you guys could show up, we can shoot a bunch more episodes, and we'll get back to releasing an episode once a week of Deal Destruction. Appreciate you guys watching this video. If you got value, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks, guys.